The handcuffs clicked shut around my brother's wrists with a sound so final it seemed to echo through our childhood home. Marcus stood there in his expensive Italian suit, the one he'd bought with money that wasn't his face a mask of disbelief and rage. The FBI agents flanking him were professional, calm, methodical. But when the lead agent turned to me and gave a respectful nod, calling me Agent Rivera, the color drained from Marcus's face completely. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. For 26 years, I had been the family disappointment, the sister who played pretend with her little government job while Marcus built his empire of lies. Today, that empire came crashing down, and the sister they'd dismissed as a failure was the one holding the sledgehammer. The foundation of my invisibility was laid early, cemented by a family that saw success only in dollar signs and social status. Growing up in Westchester County in a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine but felt like a mausoleum, I learned that love was conditional and approval had to be earned through very specific achievements. My parents, Elena and David Castellano, were the kind of people who measured their worth by their address, their cars, and most importantly, their children's accomplishments that they could brag about at cocktail parties. They owned a successful chain of high-end restaurants across New York and Connecticut, the kind of establishments where celebrities occasionally dined and where my father could name-drop to anyone who would listen. Marcus, 3 years older than me, was their masterpiece. Charming, handsome, with the kind of easy confidence that opened doors before he even knocked. He was the child who could do no wrong, even when he was doing everything wrong. I was Sophia, the afterthought, the daughter who asked too many questions and never seemed to fit the mold they'd prepared for me. The pattern established itself when I was 7 and Marcus was 10. It was Christmas morning, and under our massive tree sat two very different piles of presents. Marcus's gifts were expensive, thoughtful, numerous. A new bike, the latest gaming system, designer clothes. My pile was smaller, practical. School supplies, books, a modest doll that looked like it came from the clearance rack. When I asked my mother why there was such a difference, she knelt down and smoothed my hair with the kind of patronizing gentleness that would become her trademark response to my questions. "Marcus is older, sweetheart. He needs more things. Besides, you're such a good girl. You don't need much to be happy." Even at 7, I understood the subtext. Marcus was the investment. I was the consolation prize. This dynamic only intensified as we got older. When Marcus crashed his first car at 16, a brand new BMW our parents had gifted him for his birthday, they bought him another one within a week. "Boys will be boys," my father said, laughing as he signed the insurance paperwork. When I accidentally broke a vase while helping with housework at 14, I was grounded for 2 weeks and had to pay for the replacement with my babysitting money. Marcus coasted through high school with mediocre grades and a disciplinary record that would have destroyed any other student's college prospects. But money and connections smoothed every rough edge. My parents hired expensive tutors, made donations to the right schools, and called in favors to ensure their golden son landed at an Ivy League university. I, meanwhile, maintained a perfect GPA, captained the debate team, volunteered at the local animal shelter, and worked part-time at a bookstore to save money for college applications. The night I received my acceptance letter to Georgetown University with a partial academic scholarship, I burst into the dining room where my family was eating dinner. My hands were shaking as I held the letter, my voice cracking with excitement as I read the words aloud. I had done it. I had earned my way into one of the most prestigious universities in the country. The silence that followed was deafening. My father continued cutting his steak without looking up. My mother offered a tight smile that never reached her eyes. Marcus actually laughed, a sound that cut through my joy like a knife. "Georgetown?" he said, leaning back in his chair. "That's cute, Sophia. Playing with the big kids now?" My father finally looked up, his expression mildly annoyed, as if I had interrupted something important. "It's a good school. Though I hope you've thought about how you're going to pay for it. These government schools don't come cheap." Government schools. As if Georgetown was some community college instead of one of the most respected institutions in the nation. as if the partial scholarship I'd earned through 4 years of perfect grades and countless hours of community service was somehow less valuable than Marcus's full ride to Columbia, purchased with a hefty donation in his grandfather's alumni connections. That night, I lay awake staring at the acceptance letter, and something shifted inside me. The excitement was still there, but it was now wrapped in a cold determination I'd never felt before. If they couldn't see my worth, I would build it without them. If they couldn't recognize my achievements, I would create achievements so undeniable that their blindness would become irrelevant. At Georgetown, I threw myself into my studies with a focus that bordered on obsession. I majored in criminology with a minor in computer science, fascinated by the intersection of technology and law enforcement. While my classmates partied and networked, I spent my weekends at the library or interning at local law enforcement agencies. I volunteered with the campus police, shadowed detectives in Washington, D.C., and built relationships with professors who had connections in federal law enforcement. My parents visited exactly once during my 4 years there, a perfunctory appearance at my graduation that lasted less than 2 hours. They posed for photos with forced smiles, my mother commenting quietly that my cap and gown made me look so serious, and left before the reception. Marcus didn't come at all. He was busy with his internship at a prestigious investment firm in Manhattan, the kind of opportunity that had been handed to him like everything else in his life. That graduation day, sitting alone in my dorm room after my parents had driven back to Westchester, I made a decision that would define the next chapter of my life. I wasn't going to chase their approval anymore. I wasn't going to try to fit into their narrow definition of success. I was going to build something they couldn't understand, couldn't control, and couldn't diminish with their casual dismissal. 6 months later, I was accepted into the FBI Academy at Quantico. The 21 weeks of training at Quantico were the hardest and most rewarding months of my life. The physical demands pushed me beyond limits I didn't know I had. The academic requirements challenged every assumption I had ever made about justice, law, and human nature. The psychological evaluations forced me to confront the wounds my family had inflicted and transform them into strengths. I excelled in ways that surprised even me. My professors noted my analytical skills, my ability to see patterns others missed, my quiet but unshakable determination. I specialized in financial crimes and cybersecurity, drawn to the complex puzzles of white-collar criminals who thought they were too smart to get caught. There was something deeply satisfying about unraveling the careful lies of people who believed their money and connections made them untouchable. During my training, I called home exactly twice. Both conversations followed the same script. My mother would ask how my police training was going, as if the FBI was some local precinct instead of the premier law enforcement agency in the world.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My father would inquire about when I might be ready to come home and help with the family business, assuming my career was some kind of phase I would eventually outgrow. Marcus would grab the phone at some point to tell me about his latest promotion or his new apartment in Manhattan, his voice carrying the casual condescension of someone addressing a younger sibling who was still playing dress-up. I stopped calling after that. My first assignment was to the New York field office, a twist of fate that put me back in my home state, but a world away from the family that had shaped me. I was assigned to the white-collar crime division, investigating financial fraud, money laundering, and corruption cases. The work was exactly what I had hoped for: complex, challenging, and utterly consuming. My colleagues respected competence above all else. They didn't care about my family connections or lack thereof. They didn't measure my worth by the car I drove or the clothes I wore. They cared about results, about the cases we closed and the criminals we put behind bars. For the first time in my life, I was valued for who I was, rather than dismissed for who I wasn't. I rented a small apartment in Queens, nothing fancy but entirely mine. The walls were bare except for my FBI Academy graduation photo and a few certificates of commendation I had earned during my first year. It wasn't much, but it represented something my childhood home never had: authentic achievement earned through my own merit. Meanwhile, Marcus's star continued to rise in the investment world. He'd landed a position at a boutique firm in Manhattan that specialized in high-risk, high-reward trading strategies. Our parents spoke about him constantly during the rare times we communicated, their voices glowing with pride as they described his corner office, his expensive suits, his growing portfolio of wealthy clients. The irony wasn't lost on me that while they bragged about Marcus's success in the financial world, I was spending my days investigating the exact kind of crimes that ambitious young financiers sometimes commit when legitimate success isn't enough. But I kept that observation to myself. They wouldn't have understood the connection anyway. 3 years into my career, I was promoted to senior special agent and assigned to a joint task force investigating a sophisticated money laundering operation that was funneling millions of dollars through a network of shell companies and offshore accounts. The case was massive, involving multiple agencies and requiring the kind of financial expertise that had become my specialty. The investigation took over a year, involving surveillance, undercover operations, and the painstaking analysis of thousands of financial documents. We followed money through layers of legitimate-looking businesses, tracked communications across encrypted networks, and slowly built a case that would ultimately take down one of the most sophisticated financial crime rings we'd ever encountered. The breakthrough came when we identified a pattern in the transactions that revealed the true structure of the operation. Money was flowing through a series of investment firms, each transaction carefully crafted to appear legitimate, while actually serving to clean dirty money from drug trafficking, arms dealing, and human trafficking operations. The sophistication was impressive, but not impressive enough to hide from agents who understood how to read between the lines of financial records. As we prepared to make our arrests, I reviewed the list of individuals and companies we'd identified as part of the network. Most of the names meant nothing to me, just another collection of criminals who thought they were too smart to get caught. But as I scrolled through the final list, one name jumped out at me like a slap across the face. Marcus Castellano. My brother's name was buried deep in the financial records, hidden behind layers of legitimate-looking transactions and shell companies. But once I saw it, the pattern became clear. He wasn't a peripheral figure or an unwitting participant. He was one of the main conduits, using his investment firm's reputation and client base to launder millions of dollars for the criminal organization we'd been tracking. I stared at the computer screen for a long time, my coffee growing cold as I processed what I was seeing. My brother, the golden child who could do no wrong, was a federal criminal. The success our parents had bragged about for years was built on a foundation of money laundering, fraud, and connections to some of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the country. The professional part of me felt satisfaction at solving another piece of the puzzle. The sister in me felt something more complicated, a mixture of vindication and sadness that I couldn't quite name. Marcus had always been the favored one, the child who was destined for greatness. Now I knew the truth about what that greatness actually looked like. I took the evidence to my supervisor, Agent Thompson, a 20-year veteran who had become something of a mentor during my time with the task force. I explained the situation clearly and professionally, noting the potential conflict of interest while emphasizing that the evidence was solid and the case was too important to be compromised by personal relationships. Agent Thompson studied the documents for a long time before looking up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "This is your brother," he said, not a question but a statement. "Yes," I replied, "but he's also a criminal, and this case is bigger than any family complications." Thompson nodded slowly. "I need to ask you directly, Agent Rivera. Can you handle this professionally? Because if there's any chance that family loyalty might compromise your judgment, I need to reassign you right now." The question hung in the air between us. I thought about all the years of being overlooked, all the casual dismissals, all the times Marcus had been celebrated while I was ignored. I thought about the victims of the crimes we were investigating, the legitimate businesses harmed by money laundering, the communities destroyed by the trafficking operations this network supported. "Agent Thompson," I said, my voice steady and clear, "I've spent my entire life being told that Marcus was better than me, more successful than me, more important than me. What I've learned in this investigation is that he's actually a criminal who's been hiding behind legitimate business to launder money for drug dealers and human traffickers. My personal feelings about my family don't change the fact that he needs to be held accountable for his crimes. Thompson studied my face for a moment longer, then nodded. All right, Agent Rivera, you stay on the case. But I want you to know that when we make these arrests, there's going to be media attention. Your family is going to find out about your role in this investigation in a very public way. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my parents' reaction when they learned that their golden son was a criminal and their disappointing daughter was the federal agent who brought him down. I thought about Marcus's face when he realized that the sister he'd dismissed as playing pretend was actually the agent who'd been tracking his illegal activities for over a year. I'm prepared, I told Agent Thompson, and for the first time in my life, I truly was. The arrest was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in late September. We had coordinated with multiple agencies to execute simultaneous raids on 12 locations across New York and New Jersey. Marcus would be arrested at his office in Manhattan, along with 7 other individuals who had been identified as key players in the money laundering network. I wasn't assigned to arrest Marcus directly. Thompson had made that decision to avoid any potential complications or accusations of bias. But I would be present during the operation, helping to coordinate the financial evidence that would be seized and ensuring that the complex paper trail we had built over the past year was properly documented and preserved. The night before the arrests, I sat in my apartment reviewing the case files one final time. The evidence was overwhelming, the case airtight. Marcus and his co-conspirators had laundered over $50 million through their network, taking a substantial percentage as profit while enabling some of the most destructive criminal enterprises operating in the region. As I closed the final folder, I realized that I felt no guilt about my role in the investigation. I had done my job exactly as I was trained to do it, following the evidence wherever it led and building a case based on facts rather than personal relationships. If Marcus was facing federal charges, it was because of his own choices, not because of any vendetta on my part. But I would be lying if I said that there wasn't a part of me that was looking forward to the moment when the family that had spent decades dismissing me would finally see exactly what I was capable of. The morning of the arrest dawned clear and cold, with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything seem sharper and more defined. I arrived at the federal building at 6 a.m., 2 hours before the coordinated raids would begin. The task force had been preparing for this moment for months, and the energy in the room was focused and professional. Agent Thompson gathered the team for a final briefing, reviewing the arrest protocols and evidence seizure procedures one more time.
I was assigned to the team that would handle Marcus's office, not as the arresting agent, but as the financial crimes specialist who could identify and preserve the most crucial evidence. As we prepared to leave for the locations, Thompson pulled me aside one final time. "You sure you're ready for this, Rivera?" I adjusted my bulletproof vest and checked my weapon, the same routine I'd followed hundreds of times before. "I've been ready for this my entire life, sir. I just didn't know it until now." At 8 o'clock sharp, 12 teams of federal agents executed coordinated raids across the metropolitan area. The operation was flawless, the result of months of planning and surveillance. Within 30 minutes, 11 individuals had been arrested and hundreds of boxes of evidence had been secured. I stood in Marcus's office, watching as agents systematically photographed and cataloged every document, every computer file, every piece of evidence that would be used to build the case against him. The office was impressive, all glass and steel with a view of the Hudson River that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. The success he had worked so hard to display was everywhere, from the expensive art on the walls to the handmade suits hanging in his personal closet. But I could also see the evidence of his crimes hidden in plain sight. The multiple phones he used to communicate with his criminal contacts, the encrypted laptops that contained the financial records we'd been tracking, the business cards from shell companies that existed only to launder dirty money. When the evidence collection was complete, I found myself alone in Marcus's office for a few minutes. I stood behind his desk, looking out at the view he'd enjoyed while facilitating some of the most destructive criminal enterprises in the region. This was the success our parents had celebrated, the achievement they had held up as the standard I could never meet. I thought about the young woman I'd been, sitting in that graduation cap and gown while my parents rushed through their obligatory appearance before hurrying back to their real lives. I thought about all the times I'd been dismissed as playing pretend while Marcus was celebrated for building something that turned out to be an elaborate criminal enterprise. My radio crackled with Thompson's voice. "Rivera, we need you downstairs. Time to go." As I walked toward the elevator, I realized that the most satisfying part of this entire investigation wasn't the arrests or the evidence we'd gathered. It was the quiet knowledge that I had spent the last year doing exactly what I was trained to do, following the truth wherever it led, regardless of who got hurt along the way. The family that had shaped me had taught me that worth was measured by external success and social status. But my real family, the agents I worked with every day, had taught me that worth was measured by integrity, competence, and the willingness to do what was right even when it was difficult. As the elevator doors closed behind me, I knew that the hardest part was yet to come. Soon, my parents would learn that their golden son was a criminal and their disappointing daughter was the federal agent who had brought him down. The family dynamic that had defined my entire life was about to be turned completely upside down, but for the first time in my 26 years, I was ready for whatever came next. The phone call came on a Thursday evening while I was reviewing surveillance footage in my cramped Queens apartment. The caller ID showed Mom, a designation that felt increasingly foreign each time it appeared on my screen. We hadn't spoken in 8 months, not since the last awkward conversation where she'd asked when I might come home to help with the restaurant business, and I'd politely deflected. "Sophia, darling!" My mother's voice carried that particular tone she used when she wanted something, sweet but strained. "I have wonderful news. Marcus is getting engaged to Catherine Whitmore. You remember the Whitmores, don't you? They own that lovely art gallery in the city." I paused the video on my laptop screen, watching a frozen frame of Marcus entering a building we'd had under surveillance for 6 weeks. "That's nice, Mom. I'm happy for him." "Well, that's just it, sweetheart. They're planning this absolutely gorgeous engagement party at the Plaza Hotel. All of Marcus's business associates will be there, Catherine's family, everyone who matters. It's going to be the social event of the season." She paused, and I could hear the careful calculation in her silence. "We'd like you to come, as a family." The request hung between us like a bridge I wasn't sure I wanted to cross. I hadn't seen Marcus in person in over 2 years, not since a stilted Christmas dinner where he'd spent most of the evening on his phone conducting business, while our parents fawned over his every distracted grunt. The idea of celebrating his engagement while simultaneously building a federal case against him felt surreal. "When is it?" I asked, though I was already mentally reviewing our surveillance schedule and arrest timeline. "Saturday evening, 3 weeks from now. Oh, Sophia, it would mean so much to your father and me to have both our children there. Marcus has been asking about you, you know. He's very excited about the firm's expansion, and I think he'd love to tell you all about it." Marcus had been asking about me. The irony was almost painful. For months, I'd been studying his financial records more closely than anyone in his life ever had. I knew his business better than he probably did, understood the intricate web of illegal transactions he'd built with a clarity that would have impressed him if he'd known about it. But in his mind, I was still the little sister playing government agent while he conquered the financial world. "I'll see what I can do," I told my mother, which was my standard response to family invitations. It bought me time without committing to anything, a diplomatic skill I'd learned through years of navigating their expectations. "Oh, wonderful! I'll have your father send you the details. And Sophia, do try to find something elegant to wear. This crowd is very sophisticated, and first impressions matter so much in Marcus's world." Even in her invitation, there was the familiar sting of criticism, the assumption that I needed guidance on how to dress appropriately, that I might embarrass them with my simple federal agent wardrobe among Marcus's successful friends. Some things never change. After hanging up, I sat staring at the surveillance footage for a long time. Marcus's face filled the screen, confident and relaxed as he entered what he believed was just another business meeting. In reality, he was walking into a building we'd been monitoring for months, meeting with individuals who were central to one of the largest money laundering operations we'd ever investigated. The engagement party was scheduled for exactly 2 days before our planned arrests. The timing was coincidental, but it felt like some kind of cosmic joke. Marcus would be celebrating his future, surrounded by the very people who would watch him get arrested the following Monday morning. I called Agent Thompson at home, something I rarely did but felt necessary given the circumstances. "Rivera, what's going on?" His voice carried the weary patience of a supervisor who was used to agents calling at odd hours. "Sir, I need to discuss a scheduling conflict with the operation." I explained about the engagement party, the family expectations, the uncomfortable coincidence of timing.
Thompson was quiet for a moment. "You think attending this party could compromise the investigation?" "No, sir. If anything, it might provide additional intelligence opportunities. Most of Marcus's business associates will be there, including several individuals we've identified as persons of interest. But I wanted to be transparent about the situation. Rivera, I'm going to ask you something, and I want a completely honest answer." His tone became more serious. "Is there any part of you that wants to attend this party so you can have a front row seat to your brother's last hurrah before we arrest him?" The question caught me off guard with its directness. I thought about all the years of being overlooked, all the casual dismissals, all the times Marcus had been celebrated while I was ignored. Was there a part of me that wanted to see him at the height of his false success, knowing what was coming next? Maybe, I admitted. But that doesn't change the fact that he's a criminal, and this case is solid regardless of my personal feelings. "Good," Thompson said, surprising me. "Because if you'd said no, I would have known you were lying. Family dynamics don't disappear just because we wear badges, Rivera. The question is whether you can keep those feelings from compromising your professional judgment." "I can," I said, and I meant it. "Then attend the party. Keep your eyes open, your mouth shut, and remember that everything you observe could potentially be used as evidence. But, Rivera, yes, sir? Try to enjoy watching your brother dig his own grave a little deeper. You've earned that much." The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of final preparations for the operation. We refined our arrest protocols, coordinated with the U.S. Attorney's Office on the indictments, and conducted final surveillance sweeps to ensure we hadn't missed any crucial evidence or co-conspirators. I found myself studying Marcus more closely during this period, not just his financial crimes, but the man himself. Through months of surveillance footage, recorded phone calls, and financial records, I'd built a comprehensive picture of who my brother really was when he thought no one was watching. He was charming but ruthless, capable of laughing with clients over lunch while simultaneously stealing millions of dollars from pension funds and charitable organizations. He maintained the facade of legitimate business while conducting transactions that facilitated drug trafficking, arms dealing, and human trafficking. The golden child my parents had celebrated was actually a predator who used his charisma and social connections to exploit trust and destroy lives. But what struck me most wasn't his criminality. It was his arrogance. In recorded conversations, Marcus spoke about law enforcement with casual contempt, referring to FBI agents as government drones who were too slow and too stupid to understand sophisticated financial crimes. He joked with his co-conspirators about staying 10 steps ahead of the feds, confident that his Ivy League education and expensive lawyers made him untouchable. He had no idea that one of those government drones was his own sister, and that we'd been 10 steps ahead of him for over a year. The dress I chose for the engagement party was simple but elegant, a black cocktail dress I'd purchased for FBI formal events. As I prepared for the evening, I caught myself in the mirror and realized how much I'd changed since leaving home. The uncertain young woman who had graduated from Georgetown had been replaced by someone confident, capable, and utterly comfortable with who she'd become. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Can't wait to see you tonight, darling. Dad made reservations at Low Bernardin for Sunday brunch so we can catch up properly. So much to celebrate." So much to celebrate, indeed. By Sunday, Marcus would be in federal custody, and the family's world would be turned completely upside down. But they didn't know that yet. Tonight, they still lived in the fantasy where Marcus was the successful son and I was the disappointment who worked some vague government job.
The Plaza Hotel ballroom was exactly what I'd expected. Opulent, excessive, and designed to impress. The guest list read like a who's who of New York's financial elite, though I recognized several names from our investigation files. Catherine Whitmore moved through the crowd with the practiced grace of someone born into wealth, her engagement ring catching the light from the crystal chandeliers. My parents spotted me immediately, their faces lighting up with the kind of surprised delight reserved for pleasant, unexpected visits. My father, distinguished in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, embraced me with genuine warmth. "Sophia, sweetheart, you look beautiful," he said, and for a moment I remembered why I'd loved him so much as a child. "Marcus will be so thrilled you made it." My mother fussed over my appearance, adjusting my hair and commenting approvingly on my dress choice. "You clean up so nicely when you make an effort," she said, the compliment wrapped in its usual backhanded packaging. Marcus appeared beside us with the dramatic timing he'd perfected in childhood, Catherine on his arm, both of them glowing with the confidence of people who believed they owned the world. He looked exactly like what he was, a successful young financial layer celebrating his engagement at one of New York's most prestigious venues. What he didn't look like was a man who would be arrested by federal agents in 48 hours. "Sophia!" His embrace was enthusiastic and seemingly genuine. "I can't believe you actually came. I thought you were too busy saving the world with your government job." The phrase stung exactly as he'd intended it to, a casual dismissal wrapped in brotherly teasing. Around us, his friends and business associates laughed politely, recognizing the dynamic without understanding its history. "Just doing my part to serve the public," I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Marcus introduced me to Catherine, who was lovely and gracious, and had absolutely no idea she was engaged to a criminal. I found myself feeling genuinely sorry for her, imagining how her world would collapse when she learned the truth about the man she planned to marry. "Marcus tells me you work for the government," Catherine said with polite interest. "That must be so rewarding." "It has its moments," I replied, catching Marcus's amused expression at what he clearly saw as my modest deflection. The evening progressed with painful predictability. Marcus held court among his business associates, regaling them with stories of recent deals and successful investments. Several of these men were individuals we'd been investigating, and listening to their casual conversation was like attending a criminal conspiracy meeting disguised as a social event. "Sophia, come meet some of Marcus's business partners," my father called, beckoning me toward a group of men I'd been studying in surveillance photos for months. I approached the group with professional composure, shaking hands with individuals whose financial records I could recite from memory. They were polite but dismissive, clearly seeing me as Marcus's little sister rather than someone worth serious attention. "So, you're the Fed in the family," said James Morrison, whose consulting firm was actually a sophisticated money laundering operation. "That must be interesting work." "Very interesting," I agreed, meeting his eyes directly. "I specialize in financial crimes, white-collar investigations, money laundering, that sort of thing." If I expected any reaction, I was disappointed. Morrison just nodded politely, completely confident that his crimes were too sophisticated for someone like me to understand. The arrogance was breathtaking and, frankly, insulting. Marcus appeared beside me, placing a protective arm around my shoulders. "Sophia's being modest," he announced to the group. "She's actually quite successful in her little government job. Just got promoted recently, didn't you, sis?" The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. To him, my promotion to senior special agent was a little achievement, worth mentioning only to make me feel included in adult conversation. The men around us smiled indulgently, the way adults smile when children show them crayon drawings. "That's wonderful," Morrison said with practiced politeness. "The government needs good people." What Morrison didn't know was that this good government person had spent the last year methodically documenting every illegal transaction his consulting firm had facilitated. I had traced money through his shell companies, identified his criminal associates, and built a case that would send him to federal prison for the next 15 years. But I just smiled and thanked him for the compliment.
The evening's most surreal moment came during Marcus's toast to Catherine. He stood in the center of the ballroom, champagne glass raised, his voice carrying easily across the crowd of people who had no idea they were celebrating with a criminal. 5 years ago, Marcus began, his tone warm and confident, I was just another ambitious kid trying to make his mark in the financial world. Tonight, I stand before you as a man who has built something meaningful, something lasting. He looked directly at our parents, who were beaming with pride. I've learned that success isn't just about making money. It's about building trust, maintaining integrity, and always doing right by the people who believe in you. The irony was so profound it was almost painful to witness. Marcus spoke about integrity while standing in a room full of criminals whose money laundering activities he had facilitated. He talked about trust while systematically betraying every legitimate client who had invested with his firm. He praised the people who believed in him while stealing millions of dollars from pension funds and charitable organizations. The crowd applauded enthusiastically. Catherine gazed at him with obvious adoration. Our parents looked ready to burst with pride. And I stood there, knowing that in 48 hours, Marcus would be explaining his definition of integrity to federal prosecutors. After the toast, Marcus found me at the bar, clearly riding high on the evening's success and the adulation of his guests. "So, what do you think, little sister?" he asked, gesturing toward the opulent ballroom. "Not bad for a kid from Westchester, right?" "It's certainly impressive," I replied, which was true in more ways than he realized. "You know, Sophia, I've been thinking about you lately." His tone became more serious, taking on the quality he used when dispensing older brother wisdom. "This government thing you're doing, it's fine for now, but you're smart, you're capable, and frankly, you're wasting your talents chasing paperwork for bureaucrats who don't appreciate what you have to offer." I took a sip of wine, waiting to see where this conversation was headed. "I could bring you into the firm," Marcus continued, warming to his theme. "Start you off in compliance or risk management, something that would let you use that detail-oriented mind of yours. Within 5 years, you could be making more money than you'll see in 20 years of government work." The offer hung between us like a revelation. Marcus was literally trying to recruit me into his money laundering operation, completely oblivious to the fact that I was the federal agent who would be arresting him on Monday morning. The audacity was staggering. "That's generous of you," I said carefully, "but I'm pretty committed to my current work." "Laugh," the sound carrying a note of frustration. "Sophia, you're 26 years old and you're still playing cops and robbers for the government. When are you going to grow up and join the real world?" Playing cops and robbers. The phrase hit me like a physical blow, not because it hurt, but because it crystallized everything that was wrong with my family's perception of me. To Marcus, my career as a federal agent was an extended childhood game, something I would eventually outgrow when I was ready to pursue serious adult work like his. "Maybe sooner than you think," I replied, meeting his eyes directly. Something in my tone must have registered because Marcus's expression flickered with uncertainty for just a moment. But then he smiled again, the confident expression of someone who had never encountered a problem he couldn't charm or buy his way out of. "Well, the offer stands," he said, patting my shoulder with brotherly condescension. "Family takes care of family, right?" Family takes care of family. The words echoed in my mind as I watched Marcus return to his guests, working the room with the practiced ease of someone who believed himself untouchable. In 48 hours, he would learn what taking care of family actually meant when you chose to build your success on the destruction of others. The evening wound down with the predictable rituals of wealthy social gatherings. Business cards were exchanged, future lunch dates were promised, and everyone performed the elaborate dance of networking disguised as friendship. I watched it all with the detached fascination of an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. As guests began to leave, my parents approached me with the satisfied expressions of people who had successfully orchestrated a perfect evening. "Wasn't that wonderful?" my mother gushed. "And Catherine is absolutely lovely. And did you see how Marcus commanded that room? He's become such an important person." "Very impressive," I agreed, though we were clearly impressed by different things. My father embraced me warmly. His pride in the evening was evident in every gesture. I'm so glad you came tonight, sweetheart. It means everything to my mother and me to have both our children here for something this special. For a moment, I felt a pang of genuine sadness for what was about to happen to them. They weren't criminals, they were just parents who had built their identities around their son's success. In 3 days, they would learn that the success they'd celebrated actually was a criminal enterprise that had destroyed countless lives. "We'll see you Sunday for brunch, won't we?" my mother asked.
Le Bernardin at 11. We have so much catching up to do. Sunday brunch. By Sunday, Marcus would have spent his first night in federal custody, and I would be dealing with the media attention that always followed major white-collar arrests. The idea of sitting in an elegant restaurant pretending nothing had changed felt impossible. "I'll do my best," I said, which was becoming my standard response to family invitations. Marcus appeared for final goodbyes, Catherine beside him, both still glowing with the success of the evening. He hugged me with genuine warmth, the gesture of someone who believed we shared the same world and the same values. "Thank you for being here tonight, Sophia. I know family gatherings aren't really your thing, but it meant a lot to have my little sister celebrating with us." His little sister. Even now, even after years of federal law enforcement training and successful cases and professional recognition, I was still his little sister, playing games while he handled important adult business. "Congratulations, Marcus," I said, meaning it in ways he couldn't possibly understand. "I hope you get everything you deserve." As I left the Plaza Hotel and walked out into the cool October night, I felt a strange sense of completion. For 26 years, I had been defined by what I wasn't in comparison to Marcus. I wasn't charming enough, successful enough, important enough to earn my family's respect or attention. Monday morning would change that forever. Not because I wanted revenge or validation, but because the truth has a way of revealing itself, regardless of who wants to hide from it. Marcus had built his success on lies, and lies eventually collapse under their own weight. I had simply been the one holding the shovel when the foundation finally gave way. The weekend passed with surreal normalcy. I reviewed case files, coordinated with other agents, and made final preparations for Monday's arrests. The investigation that had consumed over a year of my life was entering its final phase, and every detail had to be perfect. Sunday evening, I sat in my apartment, reviewing the arrest warrants one final time. Marcus's name appeared on multiple documents, each representing a different aspect of his criminal activities: money laundering, conspiracy, fraud, racketeering. The charges read like a catalog of white-collar crimes, each carrying substantial prison time. My phone rang at 9 p.m. The caller ID showed Marcus's name, which surprised me. We rarely spoke outside of family gatherings, and certainly never on Sunday evenings. "Sophia, hey, sorry to call so late." His voice carried a note of uncertainty I'd never heard before. "I was just thinking about last night, about our conversation." "What about it?" "You seemed different somehow, more confident, I guess. It got me thinking about your work, about what you actually do for the FBI." He paused, and I could hear the careful consideration in his silence. I realized I don't really know much about your job beyond the basics. What kind of cases do you work on? The question hung between us like a test. Marcus had never shown genuine interest in my career before, never asked about my work beyond perfunctory family gathering small talk. His sudden curiosity felt significant, though I couldn't determine whether it represented genuine brotherly interest or something more calculated. "Financial crimes, mostly," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "White-collar investigations." "That sounds complex. Like corporate fraud, that kind of thing?" "Among other things, yes." Another pause, longer this time. When Marcus spoke again, his voice carried a quality I'd never heard from him before, something that might have been worry. "Sophia, can I ask you something? And I want you to be completely honest with me." "Of course." "If someone you cared about was involved in something questionable, something that might be legally problematic, would you have an obligation to report it, even if it was family?" The question hit me like ice water in my veins. After a year of investigation, after months of building an airtight case, after all the surveillance and financial analysis and careful documentation, Marcus was asking me directly about the very situation we were living in. I thought about the conversation with Agent Thompson, about professional ethics and family loyalty. I thought about the victims of Marcus's crimes, the pension funds that had been looted, the charitable organizations that had been defrauded. I thought about integrity and justice, and the oath I'd taken when I joined the FBI. Marcus, are you asking me as my brother, or as someone who might need legal advice? I'm asking as someone who cares about you and wants to make sure you're prepared for whatever might be coming. Whatever might be coming. The phrase suggested he knew something, suspected something, felt the walls closing in even if he couldn't see them clearly. For a moment, I felt something that might have been sympathy for the man who had dismissed me for so many years, but was now turning to me for help. Marcus, if you're involved in something illegal, you should speak to a lawyer, a real lawyer, not your sister who works for the FBI. But if you knew something, you'd tell me, right? I mean, we're family. Family, the word that had been used to justify years of favoritism and dismissal, now being invoked to ask me to compromise my professional integrity and possibly obstruct justice. Marcus, I can't have this conversation with you. If you need legal advice, call a lawyer. If you need family support, call mom and dad, but don't ask me to choose between my badge and my blood, because that's not a choice I should have to make. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was quiet and strained. I love you, Sophia. I know I haven't always been the best brother, but I want you to know that I love you and I'm proud of what you've accomplished. The words hit me harder than I had expected. In 26 years, Marcus had never told me he was proud of me, had never acknowledged my accomplishments as anything more than cute attempts at adult success. Hearing it now, 12 hours before his arrest, felt like a gift and a knife wound simultaneously. I love you too, Marcus, and I hope you remember that tomorrow, whatever happens.
After hanging up, I sat in my dark apartment for a long time, processing the conversation and what it might mean. Marcus's call could have been coincidence, the result of a guilty conscience finally catching up to him, or it could have been something more calculated, an attempt to gauge whether I knew about his activities or might provide him with advance warning. Either way, it didn't change what would happen tomorrow morning. The evidence was solid, the case was airtight, and Marcus would be arrested regardless of what he suspected or what he hoped to learn from me. But his words echoed in my mind as I tried to sleep. I love you, Sophia. I'm proud of what you've accomplished. After years of dismissal and condescension, Marcus had finally told me he was proud of me. The timing was tragic, the context was heartbreaking, and the irony was almost unbearable. Tomorrow, he would learn exactly what I had accomplished and exactly what it meant for his future. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that made everything seem inevitable. I stood in my bathroom at 5:30 a.m., adjusting my bulletproof vest and checking my service weapon with the methodical precision that had become second nature over the past 3 years. The face looking back at me in the mirror was calm, professional, ready. There was no trace of the uncertain young woman who had once begged her father for $500 to pay for college prep courses. Agent Thompson had scheduled the final briefing for 6 a.m., giving us 2 hours to review protocols and coordinate with the multiple agencies involved in the operation. As I drove through the empty streets of Queens toward the federal building, I thought about Marcus waking up in his expensive Manhattan apartment, probably reviewing his schedule for what he believed would be another successful day of criminal enterprise disguised as legitimate business. The task force conference room buzzed with controlled energy as agents reviewed their assignments one final time. 12 simultaneous arrests across 3 states, coordinated to prevent any possibility of suspects warning each other or destroying evidence. It was the kind of operation that represented months of meticulous planning and years of investigative experience. Thompson called the room to attention, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had orchestrated dozens of similar operations.
Today marks the culmination of 18 months of investigation into one of the most sophisticated money laundering networks we've encountered. The evidence is overwhelming, the legal foundation is solid, and the coordination between agencies has been flawless. He paused, scanning the faces around the table. But I want to remind everyone that these suspects are intelligent, well-connected, and potentially dangerous when cornered. Stay professional, stay alert, and remember that everything we do today will be scrutinized in court. I was assigned to Team 3, responsible for the arrests at Meridian Financial Group, the investment firm where Marcus worked as senior partner. My role was to coordinate the seizure of financial evidence while other agents handled the actual arrests. Thompson had made this decision to maintain the appearance of objectivity, though everyone in the room knew about my relationship to one of the primary suspects. As we prepared to leave for our assigned locations, Thompson pulled me aside one final time. "Rivera, I know this is complicated for you on a personal level. How are you holding up?" The question was both professional and genuinely caring, reflecting the relationship we'd built over the past year. Thompson had become something of a father figure, the kind of mentor who pushed me to excellence while also ensuring I didn't lose myself in the work. "I'm focused on the job, sir. Personal feelings don't change the fact that these people are criminals who need to be held accountable." Thompson studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "Good. But Rivera, when this is over, take some time to process what happened. Family dynamics don't disappear just because someone gets arrested, and you're going to need to deal with the aftermath." At 7:45 a.m., our convoy of unmarked vehicles pulled up outside the gleaming office tower that housed Meridian Financial Group. The building represented everything Marcus valued: prestige, success, the appearance of legitimate achievement built on a foundation most people never examined too closely. The lobby was already busy with early arriving office workers, their morning routines about to be dramatically interrupted by the presence of federal agents. We moved through the space with quiet efficiency, our badges and serious expressions clearing a path toward the elevator bank. Marcus's office was on the 32nd floor, a corner space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of the city he believed he had conquered. As the elevator rose toward our destination, I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. The moment I had been unconsciously preparing for my entire life was finally arriving. The elevator doors opened to reveal the elegant reception area of Meridian Financial Group, all marble and mahogany and subtle displays of wealth. The young woman behind the reception desk looked up with professional courtesy that quickly transformed into confusion as 6 federal agents emerged from the elevator. "FBI," announced Agent Martinez, our team leader, displaying his badge with practiced authority. "We have warrants for the arrest of Marcus Castellano, Vincent Chen, and Angela Reeves. We also have warrants to search these premises and seize specified materials." The receptionist's face went pale as she reached for her phone, probably to warn the partners about the federal agents who had just invaded their sanctuary. Martinez moved smoothly to intercept her hand. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the phone and remain calm. This is a federal law enforcement operation and your cooperation is required." The office erupted into controlled chaos as agents spread out to secure the premises and locate the suspects. I could hear voices from the conference rooms and individual offices as employees realized their workplace was being raided by federal agents. Some sounded panicked, others confused, a few defiant. I followed Agent Martinez toward Marcus's office, my heart beating with steady precision rather than anxiety. Through the glass walls that separated the executive offices from the main floor, I could see Marcus at his desk, phone pressed to his ear, his expression shifting from annoyance to concern to something approaching fear as he processed what was happening around him. Martinez pushed open the office door without knocking, his badge visible and his voice carrying absolute authority. "Marcus Castellano, FBI, you're arrested." Marcus's phone clattered to his desk as he stood up, his face cycling through expressions of shock, confusion, and desperate calculation. This was the moment when his charming confidence would either serve him or abandon him completely. "There must be some mistake," Marcus said, his voice carrying the reasonable tone of someone accustomed to talking his way out of problems. "I'm a legitimate businessman. Whatever you think I've done—" "You have the right to stay silent," Martinez continued, ignoring Marcus's protests as he moved around the desk.
Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. It was then that Marcus saw me standing in the doorway of his office, wearing my federal windbreaker and watching the scene unfold with professional detachment. The recognition hit his face like a physical blow, his expression transforming from confused protest to absolute shock. Sophia? His voice cracked on my name, carrying a note of disbelief that might have been heartbreaking under different circumstances. What are you doing here? Agent Martinez paused in his recitation of Miranda rights, glancing between Marcus and me with the quick assessment of someone trained to read complex situations. You know Agent Rivera? She's my sister, Marcus said, the words sounding hollow in the elegant office that would never be his again. Sophia, what's going on? Why are you here? Martinez resumed the arrest process, turning Marcus around to apply handcuffs while continuing to read his rights. But Marcus kept his eyes fixed on me, searching my face for some explanation that would make sense of what was happening to him. Agent Rivera is part of the Financial Crimes Task Force that has been investigating your money laundering operation for the past 18 months, Martinez explained with professional courtesy.
She's here in her capacity as a federal agent, not as your sister. The words hit Marcus like successive hammer blows. 18 months of investigation, Financial Crimes Task Force, money laundering operation. His sister, the one he'd dismissed as playing cops and robbers, had been the federal agent tracking his criminal activities for over a year. Sophia, is this true? Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper, stripped of all the confidence and charm that had defined him for as long as I could remember. You've been investigating me? I stepped into the office, my voice steady and professional. Marcus Castellano, you were being arrested on federal charges, including conspiracy to commit money laundering, wire fraud, and violation of the Bank Secrecy Act. The evidence against you includes financial records, recorded conversations, and surveillance documentation spanning the past 18 months. Marcus stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language, his mind clearly struggling to process the reality of his situation. His little sister, the family disappointment who worked some vague government job, was actually a federal agent who had built the case that was destroying his life? But you said you investigated financial crimes, he said, grasping for some thread of logic that would make this nightmare make sense. I never imagined that your sister, who plays with paperwork for the government, might actually be competent at her job, I said quietly. You never imagined that someone you dismissed as unimportant might be capable of understanding your business better than you do. The truth of my words registered on his face like a slap. For years, Marcus had treated my career as an extended childhood phase, something I would eventually outgrow when I was ready for serious adult work like his. The revelation that I had been conducting a sophisticated federal investigation while he condescended to me about my little government job was shattering his fundamental understanding of our relationship. Martinez finished securing the handcuffs and began guiding Marcus toward the door. We need to go now, Mr. Castellano. Your attorney can meet you at the federal courthouse. As they moved past me, Marcus stopped and looked directly into my eyes with an expression I had never seen from him before. It wasn't anger or betrayal or even fear. Though all of those emotions were present, it was recognition, the dawning understanding of who I actually was beneath the little sister persona he had constructed for me. The phone call last night, he said, his voice carrying the weight of realization. You knew this was coming? Yes, I replied simply. I've known for months. And you never warned me? Your own brother? The accusation hung between us like a final test of loyalty. Marcus was asking me to acknowledge that family should have trumped justice, that blood should have overridden the oath I had taken to uphold the law. Marcus, you facilitated the laundering of over $50 million in drug money, proceeds from human trafficking, and funds stolen from pension accounts. Your crimes harmed thousands of people, destroyed families, and enabled some of the most destructive criminal enterprises operating in this region. My voice remained steady, professional, final. Loving you doesn't change the fact that you chose to become a criminal, and it doesn't change my obligation to hold you accountable for that choice. Martinez resumed guiding Marcus toward the elevator, but my brother continued to look back at me with that expression of shocked recognition. As they disappeared around the corner, I heard him say something that sounded like, "I never knew you at all." The observation was accurate, but not in the way he meant it. Marcus had never known me because he had never bothered to see me. He had constructed a version of me that fit his narrative about family hierarchy and success, and he had been so committed to that construction that he missed 18 months of federal investigation happening right under his nose. The evidence seizure took 4 hours to complete. We removed computers, financial records, client files, and communication devices that would provide prosecutors with the documentation needed to secure convictions. I worked with methodical precision, cataloging evidence that I had helped gather through months of surveillance and financial analysis. Agent Chen, our financial crime specialist, paused beside me as I sealed a box of documents that would probably send Vincent Chen, no relation, to prison for the next decade. Rivera, I have to ask, what was it like watching your own brother get arrested? The question was asked with genuine curiosity rather than judgment. Chen understood the complexity of working cases that intersected with personal relationships, and he was trying to gauge how I was processing the experience. It was like watching a stranger get arrested for crimes I've been investigating, I replied, which was more honest than I had expected to be. The Marcus who got handcuffed this morning isn't the brother I grew up with. That person was a construction, a character he played to hide who he really was. Chen nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes the hardest part of this job is learning that people aren't who we thought they were. By noon, the evidence seizure was complete, and all 3 suspects from Meridian Financial Group were in federal custody. The media had arrived, as they always did for high-profile white-collar arrests, their cameras capturing images of men in expensive suits being led away in handcuffs. My phone had been buzzing constantly since 9 a.m., missed calls and text messages from my parents that I hadn't answered. They would have seen the news coverage, would have recognized Marcus among the suspects being arrested. Their world was collapsing in real time, and they had no idea that their disappointing daughter was one of the federal agents responsible for that collapse. Agent Thompson appeared beside me as I loaded the last box of evidence into our transport vehicle. "Rivera, you need to go home. Take the rest of the day to process what happened and be prepared for media attention. High-profile cases like this generate a lot of public interest." "Sir, I'd prefer to continue working on case documentation." "That's an order, Rivera. Go home, turn off your phone for a few hours, and remember that you just concluded one of the most successful financial crimes investigations this office has handled. You should be proud of the work you've done." The drive home to Queens felt surreal after the intensity of the morning's operation. The streets looked exactly the same as they had at dawn, but everything felt different now that the investigation was over and Marcus was in federal custody. I had spent 18 months building toward this moment, and now that it had arrived, I felt strangely empty rather than triumphant. My apartment was exactly as I had left it that morning, but it felt like I was seeing it for the first time. The case files that had dominated my dining table for months were suddenly just paper and photographs. The surveillance images of Marcus that I had studied with professional detachment now looked like pictures of a stranger who happened to share my DNA. I finally looked at my phone around 2 p.m., scrolling through dozens of missed calls and text messages from my parents.
The messages followed a predictable progression from confusion to panic to desperate pleas for information. From my mother, "Sophia, we saw the news about Marcus. Please call us immediately. We don't understand what's happening." From my father, "Your brother has been arrested. Where are you? Why aren't you answering your phone?" From my mother again, "The lawyers are saying these charges are very serious. Sophia, we need you to come home right now. Family emergency." Family emergency. The phrase carried bitter irony, considering that I had been investigating the family emergency for over a year, while they celebrated Marcus's criminal success. The final message, sent just an hour earlier, was from my father, and carried a tone of desperate command. "Sophia, get in your car and drive home immediately. I don't care what you're doing, your brother needs our support, and this family stays together during crises." This family stays together during crises. Where had that principle been when I was working 2 jobs to pay for college applications while Marcus received a new car? Where was family loyalty when I was serving my country overseas while they dismissed my achievements as avoiding responsibility? I turned off my phone without responding to any of the messages. Whatever conversation awaited me with my parents could wait until I was ready to have it on my terms rather than theirs. The evening news coverage was extensive, with reporters providing breathless accounts of the morning's arrests and the sophisticated money laundering scheme that had been uncovered. Marcus's photograph appeared repeatedly, the handsome young financier who had built an empire on criminal foundations. The reporter's voice carried the dramatic intonation reserved for major financial crimes. Authorities say the investigation, led by a joint task force including FBI agents specializing in financial crimes, uncovered a network that laundered over $50 million in proceeds from drug trafficking, human trafficking, and fraud targeting charitable organizations. My name wasn't mentioned in the coverage, which was standard procedure for ongoing cases, but I knew that wouldn't last long. High-profile cases generated intense media attention, and eventually my role in the investigation would become public knowledge. I spent the evening reading case files and preparing for the media attention that would inevitably follow. In a day or two, some enterprising reporter would discover that one of the FBI agents who had investigated Marcus Castellano was his own sister. That revelation would transform the story from a routine financial crimes case into a human interest drama about family loyalty and conflicting obligations. My phone rang at 9 p.m., showing Agent Thompson's name on the caller ID. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but decided that avoiding my supervisor wasn't a viable long-term strategy. "Rivera, I need to ask you a direct question, and I want a completely honest answer," Thompson said without preamble. "Are you holding up okay after today?" The concern in his voice was genuine, reflecting the relationship we had built over months of working together. Thompson understood that investigating family members created emotional complications that standard training didn't address. "I'm processing it, sir. It's complicated, but I'm handling it." "Rivera, I'm going to share something with you that doesn't leave this conversation. When I was a young agent, about your age, I worked a case that involved my own brother-in-law. Different circumstances, but similar emotional territory." He paused, and I could hear him choosing his words carefully. "The hardest part wasn't the investigation or the arrest. It was dealing with family members who expected me to choose loyalty over law, who couldn't understand that being a federal agent means something more than just having a job." His words resonated with uncomfortable accuracy. Thompson was describing exactly the situation I would face when I finally returned my parents' calls and confronted their expectations about family solidarity. "What happened with your family?" I asked. "It took years for some relationships to heal, and some never did. But Rivera, I need you to understand something that took me a long time to learn. You didn't destroy your family by doing your job. Your brother destroyed your family by choosing to become a criminal. The badge doesn't make us responsible for other people's choices, even when those people share our DNA." After hanging up with Thompson, I sat in my dark apartment thinking about family and loyalty and the different ways people define both concepts. Marcus had built his identity on the assumption that charm and connections and family name would protect him from consequences. My parents had built their pride on his false success while dismissing my legitimate achievements. But they had never understood that real loyalty sometimes means holding people accountable for their actions rather than enabling their destructive behavior. They had never recognized that true family support sometimes looks like refusing to participate in lies and cover-ups. The next morning brought a new round of media coverage and another series of desperate messages from my parents. This time, however, there was a new element. My mother's voice carried a note of suspicion that hadn't been there before. Sophia, people are asking questions about why you haven't come home during this crisis. Some of Marcus's friends think it's strange that his sister, who works for the FBI, hasn't been seen or heard from since his arrest. Call me immediately. We need to discuss this as a family. The subtext was clear. Someone had connected the dots between Marcus's arrest on federal charges and his sister's employment with the FBI. It wouldn't be long before that someone shared their suspicions with my parents, or worse, with a reporter looking for a compelling angle on the story. I spent the morning at the federal building working with prosecutors to organize the evidence that would be used in the case against Marcus and his co-conspirators. The U.S. Attorney's Office was confident about securing convictions, given the overwhelming financial documentation and recorded conversations we had gathered. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh, who would be handling the prosecution, pulled me aside after our evidence review meeting. "Agent Rivera, I need to prepare you for what's coming. Cases like this generate intense media attention, and your relationship to one of the defendants is going to become public knowledge very soon." "I understand, ma'am. I'm prepared for that." "Are you prepared for defense attorneys to argue that your personal relationship with Marcus Castellano compromised the investigation? Because they're absolutely going to make that argument regardless of how professionally you conducted yourself." The question highlighted a concern I had been avoiding. Defense attorneys would seize on any angle that might create reasonable doubt about the evidence or the investigation's integrity. "The evidence stands on its own merit," I replied. "My relationship to the defendant doesn't change the financial records, the surveillance footage, or the recorded conversations." Walsh nodded approvingly.
That's exactly the right answer, and that's exactly what you'll need to say if you're called to testify. But, Agent Rivera, be prepared for defense attorneys to try to make this about family drama rather than criminal evidence. It's going to get personal in ways that most cases don't. My phone rang as I was leaving the federal building, showing my father's name on the caller ID. I had been avoiding this conversation for 36 hours, but I knew it couldn't be delayed much longer. Eventually, I would have to face the family whose golden child I had helped place in federal custody. "Sophia, where the hell are you?" My father's voice carried a combination of panic and anger that I had rarely heard from him. "Your brother has been arrested on federal charges and you've disappeared. Do you have any idea what we're going through?" "I'm in the city, Dad. I've been working." "Working? Your brother is facing 20 years in federal prison, and you're worried about work? Sophia, I need you to come home right now. This family has a crisis, and we handle crises together." The irony of his words was almost unbearable. For 26 years, this family had handled crises by protecting Marcus and minimizing my concerns. Now, when the ultimate crisis had arrived, they expected me to abandon my principles and professional obligations to help cover up his crimes. "Dad, I can't discuss Marcus's case with you. There are legal and ethical issues that prevent me from—" "Legal issues? Ethical issues?" His voice rose to a shout. "Sophia, this is your brother we're talking about. This is family. Whatever legal technicalities you're worried about, they don't matter when family needs help." I took a deep breath, knowing that the next words I spoke would fundamentally alter my relationship with my parents. "Dad, I can't discuss Marcus's case because I was one of the federal agents who investigated him." The silence that followed was so complete, I wondered if the call had been disconnected. When my father finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "What did you just say?" "I said I was part of the federal task force that investigated Marcus for money laundering. I've been working on this case for 18 months. "You investigated your own brother?" The words sounded like they were being torn from his throat. "Sophia, what have you done?" "I did my job, Dad. Marcus was laundering money for criminal organizations, and I helped build the case that proved it." Another long silence, followed by my father's voice carrying a tone of betrayal and disbelief that cut deeper than any anger could have. "You
arrested your own brother? You put your own family member in prison? I didn't arrest Marcus, Dad. Other agents handled the arrest. But yes, I was part of the investigation that led to his arrest, and yes, the evidence we gathered will probably send him to prison for a very long time. The conversation that followed was one of the most painful experiences of my life. My father accused me of betraying family loyalty, of using my position to attack Marcus out of jealousy, of destroying the family for the sake of career advancement. Every word was designed to wound, to make me doubt my choices, to force me back into the role of the apologetic daughter who had overstepped her bounds. But underneath his anger, I could hear something else. The desperate panic of a man whose entire identity had been built around his son's success, and who was now confronting the reality that his son was a criminal and his daughter was the agent who had exposed those crimes. "Sophia, you can fix this," he said finally, his voice taking on a pleading quality. "You can talk to your supervisors, tell them there were problems with the investigation, create enough doubt to get the charges dropped. You owe us that much." The request hung between us like a chasm. My father was asking me to commit perjury, to obstruct justice, to destroy my career and compromise everything I believed in to save Marcus from the consequences of his own criminal choices. "Dad, I can't do that. I won't do that." "Then you're no daughter of mine," he said, his voice cold and final. "If you choose your job over your family, then you've made your choice about where your loyalties lie." The line went dead, leaving me standing on a busy sidewalk in Lower Manhattan, officially disowned by the family that had never truly accepted me anyway. 3 days later, the story broke exactly as I had expected it would. An enterprising reporter for the New York Post had discovered the family connection and crafted a sensational headline. "FBI sister takes down Wall Street brother in massive money laundering bust." The article was accompanied by photographs of both Marcus in handcuffs and me in my FBI Academy graduation picture, creating a visual narrative of family division that captured public attention immediately. The story portrayed the case as a dramatic confrontation between family loyalty and professional duty, exactly the kind of human interest angle that generated clicks and television appearances. Within hours, my phone was ringing constantly with interview requests from television producers, newspaper reporters, and radio hosts who wanted to explore the family drama angle. I ignored them all, following FBI protocol for cases under active prosecution. But the attention was intense and unrelenting. Reporters appeared outside my apartment building, my parents' house, and the federal building where I worked. The case had transformed from a routine financial crimes prosecution into a media sensation about family betrayal and conflicted loyalties. My parents' response to the media attention was exactly what I had expected. They granted several interviews portraying Marcus as the victim of an overzealous sister who had let professional ambition override family bonds. My mother appeared on a local news program, tears streaming down her face as she described her daughter's betrayal of her own brother. "Sophia was always jealous of Marcus's success," she told the reporter, her voice breaking with practiced emotion. "She could never accept that her brother had achieved more than she had, and I think she saw this as an opportunity to tear him down." The narrative was as predictable as it was false, but it played well for cameras and generated the kind of sympathy that might be useful during Marcus's trial. I was cast as the jealous sister who had used her federal position to destroy her successful brother, while Marcus became the victim of family dysfunction rather than a criminal who had chosen to launder money for drug dealers and human traffickers. Agent Thompson called me into his office after the third day of media coverage. "Rivera, how are you handling all this attention?" "It's exactly what I expected, sir. Defense Strategy 101. When you can't attack the evidence, attack the agents who gathered it." "That's a very professional attitude, but I'm asking about you personally. Having your family describe you as jealous and vindictive on national television can't be easy." Thompson was right, of course. Watching my mother cry on camera while describing my supposed jealousy of Marcus was devastating in ways I hadn't anticipated. But it was also clarifying, revealing the depths of their commitment to a false narrative about our family dynamic. "Sir, my parents have spent 26 years telling anyone who would listen that Marcus was the successful child, and I was the disappointment. Now they're telling reporters the same story with a slightly different emphasis. The medium has changed, but the message is the same." Thompson studied my face for a moment,
then nodded. Rivera, I want you to know that your work on this case has been exemplary. Your personal relationship to one of the suspects hasn't compromised your professional judgment in any way that I can detect. You should be proud of what you've accomplished. His words meant more than he probably realized. For the first time in my life, I was being evaluated based on my actual performance, rather than my perceived shortcomings compared to Marcus. Thompson saw competence where my family saw jealousy, professionalism where they saw betrayal, integrity where they saw vindictiveness. The trial began 4 months later, generating intense media coverage and packed courtrooms. Marcus and his co-conspirators had assembled a team of expensive defense attorneys who employed every strategy available to create doubt about the prosecution's evidence. As I had expected, much of their defense focused on my relationship to Marcus and the alleged bias that relationship created. Defense attorneys portrayed me as a vengeful sister who had manipulated the investigation to target her successful brother, suggesting that family jealousy rather than criminal evidence had driven the case. When I was called to testify, the defense attorney's cross-examination was brutal and personal. He questioned my motives, my professional conduct, and my family relationships with the kind of aggressive persistence designed to make witnesses doubt their own memories. Agent Rivera, isn't it true that you resented your brother's financial success? No, that's not true. Isn't it true that you felt overshadowed by his achievements throughout your childhood? My childhood experiences don't change the financial evidence that proves Mr. Castellano was laundering money for criminal organizations. But those childhood experiences might influence how you interpreted that evidence, correct? No, financial records don't require interpretation. Money was transferred through shell companies for the purpose of concealing its criminal origins. That's money laundering, regardless of who committed the crime. The cross-examination continued for 3 hours, with defense attorneys attempting to characterize every aspect of my testimony as biased by family resentment. But the evidence spoke for itself. Financial records, recorded conversations, surveillance footage, and the testimony of co-conspirators who had already pleaded guilty. The jury deliberated for 2 days before returning guilty verdicts on all counts for all defendants. Marcus was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, a term that reflected both the severity of his crimes and his refusal to cooperate with prosecutors or accept responsibility for his actions. I sat in the courthouse gallery as the sentence was read, watching Marcus's face as he processed the reality of spending the next 18 years behind bars. For just a moment, he looked across the courtroom and made eye contact with me, his expression carrying neither anger nor accusation, but something that might have been understanding. After the sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sunshine, officially free from the case that had dominated my life for over 2 years. The media attention would fade, the appeals would be handled by other prosecutors, and I could return to investigating other criminals who thought they were too smart to get caught. My parents didn't attend the sentencing hearing, though they issued a statement through their attorney expressing disappointment with the verdict and their intention to support Marcus through his appeals process. They still lived in the fantasy where their son was a legitimate businessman who had been railroaded by an overzealous sister and a biased justice system. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter from Marcus. The envelope was marked with the federal prison return address, his handwriting still elegant despite the circumstances. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won out over caution. The letter was 3 pages long, written in the careful script of someone who had plenty of time to choose his words precisely. Marcus didn't apologize for his crimes, didn't accept responsibility for the lives he had damaged, didn't acknowledge the victims of his money laundering activities. But he did write about me, about the sister he had never really known despite growing up in the same house. He wrote about watching me testify during his trial, seeing me as a competent professional for the first time in his life, recognizing that I had built something meaningful while he had been playing dress-up in expensive suits. I spent our entire childhood thinking I was better than you, smarter, more successful, more important. It took getting arrested by federal agents to realize that you were the one who had actually accomplished something real while I was just playing dress-up in expensive suits. The letter concluded with an observation that surprised me with its accuracy. I don't expect you to visit me or write back or try to maintain some kind of relationship while I'm in prison. But I want you to know that I finally understand who you really are, and I'm proud of what you became, even though it cost me my freedom." I read the letter 3 times, then filed it away in a drawer with other documents from the case. Marcus was right that I wouldn't visit him or try to maintain a relationship while he served his sentence, but I was glad he had finally seen me clearly, even if it had taken a federal conviction to open his eyes. My relationship with my parents never recovered. They maintained their narrative of betrayal and jealousy until it became their only way of understanding what had happened to their family. I was the daughter who had chosen career over blood, law over loyalty, professional ambition over family bonds. But I had found a different kind of family among the agents and prosecutors I worked with every day. People who valued competence over charm, integrity over connections, truth over comfortable lies. My real family was built on mutual respect and shared commitment to justice rather than accidents of birth and blood relations. 2 years after Marcus's sentencing, I was promoted to supervising special agent and assigned to lead my own task force investigating international financial crimes. The work was challenging and meaningful, exactly what I had hoped for when I first applied to join the FBI. On the day of my promotion ceremony, I stood in the same federal building where I had once arrested my own brother, wearing my dress uniform and accepting congratulations from colleagues who had become the family I had chosen for myself. My parents didn't attend, of course, still committed to their narrative about the daughter who had betrayed her own blood. But Agent Thompson was there, beaming with the pride of a mentor who had watched me grow from an uncertain young agent into a confident leader. My team members were there, professionals who respected my judgment and trusted my leadership. My real family was there, bound together by something stronger than shared DNA. Shared commitment to holding criminals accountable regardless of their wealth, connections, or family relationships. As I accepted my new badge and title, I thought about the young woman who had once begged her father for $500 to pay for college preparation courses. She had been dismissed as unimportant, overlooked as unsuccessful, treated as a disappointment who would never measure up to her golden child brother. That young woman had become a federal agent who took down one of the most sophisticated money laundering networks in recent memory. She had chosen integrity over family pressure, justice over loyalty, truth over comfortable lies. She had built a real career on real achievements rather than connections and handouts. The family that had shaped her had taught her that worth was measured by external success and social approval. But her real family, the one she had chosen, taught her that worth was measured by character, competence, and the courage to do what was right, even when it cost everything. Standing in that federal building, surrounded by people who saw her clearly and valued her authentically, she finally understood what belonging actually meant. It wasn't something you inherited or something you were given. It was something you earned through your choices, your actions, and your willingness to stand up for what you believed in, regardless of the consequences. Marcus had been right about one thing in his letter. She had become exactly who she was meant to be, even though it had cost him his freedom and cost her the family she had been born into. But sometimes the price of becoming your authentic self is losing the people who loved the version of you that never really existed in the first place. The badge felt solid and real in her hands, a symbol of everything she had built for herself through determination, integrity, and refusal to accept other people's limitations on her potential. This was who she was, Special Agent Sofia Rivera, a woman who had chosen justice over comfort, truth over family mythology, professional integrity over personal loyalty. And for the first time in her 28 years, she was exactly where she belonged. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.